There is a quiet truth most people learn only after being disappointed enough times to feel it in their bones. Not everyone who listens to your problems cares about your healing. Some listen out of curiosity, some out of comparison, some out of subtle satisfaction, and some simply to feel powerful by knowing something vulnerable about you. When you speak too freely about your struggles, you give away information before you've built trust, and information is a form of power. Behavioral psychology teaches us that humans constantly assess status, stability, and emotional control in others, often unconsciously. The more you narrate your pain to the wrong audience, the more you train them to see you as someone who is overwhelmed rather than someone who is capable. This is not about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about understanding that discretion is not secrecy born from fear, but restraint born from strength. Powerful people don't explain their pain because they are hiding. They are protecting their center. Oversharing often feels like relief in the moment because the nervous system craves release. When stress builds up, the brain looks for an outlet, and talking seems like the fastest way to offload emotional weight. But psychology shows us that relief does not always equal resolution. Temporary validation can actually reinforce a cycle where you become dependent on external soothing rather than internal regulation. Each time you tell your problems to someone who cannot help you solve them, you condition your mind to associate comfort with exposure. Over time, this weakens your emotional self-reliance. You start needing reactions, reassurance, or sympathy to feel okay. This is how people unintentionally give away their emotional authority. The strongest individuals learn to tolerate discomfort without immediately broadcasting it. They let feelings pass through them without letting those feelings define their public posture. There is also a social cost to telling people your problems that most never consider until it's too late. People remember patterns, not explanations. You may think you're sharing a temporary struggle, but others subconsciously register a recurring identity: stressed, unstable, unlucky, overwhelmed. Even if your situation improves, that first impression lingers. Psychology calls this the anchoring effect. Once someone anchors you to a certain emotional narrative, it takes far more effort to change it than it took to create it. This doesn't mean you must perform happiness or pretend everything is perfect. It means you choose carefully where your truth goes. You don't hand your raw reality to people who haven't earned the responsibility of holding it with respect and maturity. Another reason oversharing weakens personal power is that it invites unnecessary opinions. The human mind is wired to judge, advise, and compare. When you tell someone your problem, you are not just sharing information. You are opening a door for their worldview, biases, and limitations to enter your mental space. Some advice will confuse you. Some will make you doubt yourself. Some will subtly shame you. Even well-meaning people often project their own fears onto your situation. Instead of clarity, you walk away with mental noise. Strong individuals understand that not all input is useful input. They guard their inner dialogue carefully because they know focus is fragile. The more voices you invite in, the harder it becomes to hear your own. There is also a hidden power dynamic in vulnerability that most people misunderstand. Vulnerability is not weakness when it is intentional, contained, and shared with safe individuals. But uncontrolled vulnerability, expressed impulsively, can shift relational balance. When you repeatedly present yourself as the one struggling, the one confused, the one hurt, you unconsciously place others in a higher position. They become the listener, the advisor, the stable one. Over time, this can change how they treat you, respect you, or even depend on you. Power dynamics are subtle, but they are always present. Emotionally intelligent people are aware of them and choose their disclosures with precision, not impulse. Telling people your problems can also keep you psychologically stuck. When you talk more than you act, the brain can mistake expression for progress. Studies in behavioral psychology show that verbalizing intentions or struggles can reduce the urgency to change them. You feel as though you've done something, even when nothing has actually shifted. The mind seeks closure, and talking creates a false sense of it. Quiet resilience, on the other hand, keeps tension alive just long enough to fuel action. When you sit with a problem internally, You are more likely to observe it clearly, strategize effectively, and take disciplined steps forward. Silence, in this way, becomes a catalyst rather than a suppression. There is a difference between isolation and self-containment. Isolation is withdrawing because you feel unsafe or unworthy. Self-containment is choosing to process internally because you trust yourself. This trust is built, not inherited. It grows each time you resist the urge to explain yourself and instead regulate your emotions privately. You begin to realize that you do not fall apart when no one is listening. You breathe, you think, you stabilize. This realization is deeply empowering. It teaches your nervous system that you are capable of holding yourself together. Over time, this internal stability becomes visible to others without you ever having to announce it. Emotionally strong people understand that privacy is not secrecy, it is strategy. They don't hide their struggles out of shame, but out of respect for their own process. They know that some things need time, space, and silence to mature into wisdom. When you speak too early, you interrupt that process. You shape your story before it has fully formed. By staying quiet, you allow insight to develop naturally. You gain perspective instead of reacting. This is why calm individuals often appear grounded even under pressure. They have learned that not every internal storm needs an external audience. As you begin to understand why telling people your problems can weaken your personal power, you also start to see an alternative path emerging. A path where strength is quiet, boundaries are firm, and confidence is internal rather than performed. This path does not deny pain, it disciplines it. It does not reject connection, it refines it. The goal is not to become unreachable, but to become selective. When you stop explaining yourself to everyone, something subtle shifts. You move differently, you listen more, you observe more, and slowly you realize that the less you seek sympathy, the more respect you command, first from yourself and then from the world around you. As you move away from the habit of telling people your problems, something deeper begins to happen inside you. At first, it can feel uncomfortable, even lonely, because you've trained yourself to release emotional pressure through words. Silence feels heavier than speech in the beginning, but this is where emotional containment is formed. Containment is the ability to hold your feelings without suppressing them and without spilling them onto others. Psychology tells us that people with high emotional regulation don't feel less. They manage better. They allow emotions to exist without letting them take over their behavior. This skill is not glamorous, and it is rarely praised, but it is foundational to inner strength. When you stop outsourcing your emotional processing, you start developing a quiet confidence that does not depend on external reactions. Emotional containment begins with self-observation. Instead of immediately explaining what you're going through, you learn to sit with it and ask yourself precise questions. What exactly am I feeling right now? Is it fear, disappointment, anger, or grief? What triggered it? What part of this is within my control and what part is not? This internal dialogue is far more powerful than any conversation you could have with someone who does not fully understand your context. By naming your emotions privately, you reduce their intensity. The brain calms when it feels understood, even if that understanding comes from within. Over time, this practice strengthens self-trust because you prove to yourself again and again that you can handle discomfort without collapsing or seeking rescue. Self-trust is built through evidence, not affirmations. Every time you resist the urge to vent impulsively and instead regulate yourself, you create internal proof of competence. You begin to trust your judgment, your resilience, and your ability to think clearly under pressure. This trust changes how you move through the world. You stop over-explaining. You stop justifying your boundaries. You stop needing people to agree with you in order to feel secure. Behavioral psychology shows that people who trust themselves are less reactive because they are not constantly scanning for validation. Their nervous systems are calmer, their decisions are firmer, and their presence feels grounded. This is not arrogance, it is emotional maturity. Developing emotional containment also requires redefining what support actually means. Many people confuse support with constant sharing. True support is not about how many people know your struggles. It's about whether the right people are involved at the right time. Most problems do not need an audience. They need analysis, patience, and action. When you stop telling everyone what's wrong, you create space to think strategically. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally. This shift alone can change the trajectory of your life because clear thinking is impossible in a state of emotional chaos. Quiet people are not passive. They are often calculating, reflective, and prepared. Another key aspect of emotional self-reliance is learning to tolerate misunderstanding. When you don't explain your problems, some people will misinterpret your silence. They may assume you are distant, unaffected, or uninterested. This is where many people break and start explaining themselves again. But emotional strength means allowing others to think what they think without rushing to correct the narrative. You do not need to be accurately understood by everyone to live effectively. In fact, psychology shows that the need to be understood is often rooted in insecurity. When you are secure in yourself, you don't chase clarity in other people's minds. You focus on alignment within your own. Silence also sharpens discernment. When you stop talking about your problems, you start noticing how others handle information. You observe who respects boundaries and who pries. You see who listens without exploiting and who listens to gather leverage. This awareness is invaluable. It allows you to choose wisely when you do decide to open up. Emotional intelligence is not about never sharing. It's about sharing deliberately. When you speak from a place of stability rather than urgency, your words carry weight. They are measured, composed, and intentional. People respond differently to that energy. They listen more carefully because you are not asking to be saved. There is a profound strength in learning to soothe yourself. Techniques like controlled breathing, grounding, journaling, and structured problem-solving are not signs of emotional weakness. They are tools of disciplined minds. When distress arises, instead of reaching outward, you turn inward first. You slow your breathing to calm your nervous system. You write to organize your thoughts. You break the problem into smaller, manageable steps. This process builds internal order. Over time, your mind learns that discomfort is not dangerous. It is temporary, manageable, and often informative. This reduces anxiety and increases resilience because fear loses its power when it is understood and regulated. Emotional containment also protects your dignity. There is a subtle dignity in not advertising your struggles while you are still inside them. You don't let people watch you bleed and speculate about your outcome. You heal privately, and when you emerge, you do so with composure. This does not mean pretending you never struggled. It means choosing the timing and framing of your story. When you share after you've processed and grown, your experience becomes wisdom instead of raw pain. People respect that. They see strength instead of vulnerability, spiraling into helplessness. As self-trust deepens, you begin to rely less on emotional reassurance and more on internal standards. You stop asking, "Is this okay?" and start asking, "Is this aligned with my values?" This shift is critical. Validation seeking keeps you externally focused, while self-alignment keeps you internally anchored. Psychology shows that people who operate from internal standards experience less emotional volatility because their sense of worth is not constantly negotiated. They don't need sympathy to survive discomfort. They know discomfort is part of growth, not evidence of failure. With this mindset, problems are no longer something to broadcast. They become something to work through. You treat challenges like private training grounds rather than public performances. Each difficulty strengthens your mental discipline, emotional endurance, and problem-solving capacity. You begin to see that silence is not emptiness. It is space, space to think, to plan, to recalibrate. In that space, you discover a quieter, stronger version of yourself, one who does not crumble under pressure or dissolve into explanations. As you continue building this inner structure, something shifts in how you carry yourself. You become less reactive, less defensive, and more composed. Your energy changes. People sense that you are not easily shaken. This is the foundation of quiet resilience, where strength is not declared but demonstrated. And from this place, you are finally ready to move beyond emotional containment into disciplined action, solving problems without seeking sympathy, validation, or attention. and embodying a calm authority that speaks louder than words ever could. Once you have cultivated emotional containment and self-trust, the next step is learning to embody quiet resilience, a way of living where problems are handled with discipline, discretion, and deliberate action rather than words. At this stage, you no longer feel the urge to announce struggles, complain, or seek validation. Instead, you face each challenge as an opportunity to strengthen your inner authority. Psychology calls this self-directed coping, where the individual relies on internal resources before looking outward. Quiet resilience is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and strategic. It allows you to remain unshaken even in situations where chaos surrounds you. The strength of this approach lies in its invisibility. You are powerful not because others see it, but because you experience it internally and let it guide your decisions. Discipline becomes the engine of problem solving in this stage. When you stop broadcasting your challenges, you free up energy to analyze them clearly and act decisively. Without distraction from reactions, opinions, or advice, your mind sharpens. You notice solutions that were invisible when emotional noise clouded judgment. Behavioral psychology emphasizes that consistent, focused action, rather than emotional venting, produces real change. When you respond instead of react, you build competence and confidence simultaneously. Over time, people notice the results of your work more than your words. Your achievements become proof of your character, not the explanations you offer. An essential aspect of embodying quiet resilience is detachment from external validation. You learn to release the need for sympathy, reassurance, or agreement from others. This does not make you indifferent or uncaring. It makes you anchored. You understand that seeking validation is a temporary fix for insecurity, whereas self-reliance and problem-solving are enduring. Your emotional equilibrium is maintained internally. When setbacks occur, you meet them with strategy rather than complaint. You assess what is in your control, take action, and accept what is not. The result is a presence that commands respect without demanding it, a hallmark of authentic power. Another defining trait of quiet resilience is measured vulnerability. While you do not share your problems indiscriminately, you are not emotionally closed off. You know that some people deserve your trust, and some situations call for selective openness. The difference is intentionality. Vulnerability becomes a tool, not a crutch. When shared wisely, it strengthens bonds and deepens trust. When withheld indiscriminately, it preserves energy, clarity, and authority. This balance, knowing when to speak, when to act, and when to remain silent, is the essence of strategic emotional intelligence. It transforms challenges from burdens into instruments of growth and mastery. Over time, this discipline shapes identity. You are no longer defined by the problems you face, but by how you face them. You internalize the understanding that your worth is independent of circumstances or external perception. Life's difficulties become your training ground for resilience, not your stage for sympathy. This mindset fosters composure, courage, and a quiet dignity that cannot be shaken by gossip, judgment, or misunderstanding. You learn that inner strength is cumulative. Every challenge met with calm, every problem solved without spectacle, every emotion held responsibly adds to a reservoir of power that is uniquely yours. The habits of quiet resilience also transform relationships. People instinctively respect those who navigate life without constant complaint or explanation. They are drawn to individuals who are steady, deliberate, and composed under pressure. Your discretion signals maturity, and your competence invites trust. You become someone who is reliable in crises, not just in comfort. This effect is subtle but profound. People will seek your counsel, value your judgment, and notice your impact without you having to announce your struggles or justify your actions. Power, in this sense, is the byproduct of consistent, disciplined behavior rather than verbal declarations. Ultimately, embodying quiet resilience is about reclaiming your narrative. You decide what to show, what to work through silently, and how to act with integrity. You no longer allow emotional turbulence to dictate your public self or drain your energy. You meet difficulties with strategy, manage emotions internally, and maintain focus on solutions. In doing so, you demonstrate a level of self-mastery that few achieve. Problems no longer define you, and your presence communicates strength without demand. Others may never fully know the weight you carry, and that is precisely the point. True power is quiet. True resilience is unseen but undeniable. In conclusion, the journey from oversharing to quiet mastery is a process of intentional emotional growth. You move from giving away your power through words to cultivating self-trust through containment, to embodying disciplined action and measured vulnerability. You learn that problems are not signals for sympathy, but opportunities for strategic response. You discover that emotional strength is built in silence, and personal power grows when it is not broadcast. By practicing restraint, refining self-trust, and embracing quiet resilience, you transform your relationship with challenges, others, and yourself. You no longer tell people your problems because you no longer need to. They are your responsibility, your training, and ultimately, your path to unshakable inner authority. This is the essence of strength. Calm, discreet, internally anchored, and relentlessly disciplined. It is a strength that attracts respect, invites trust, and endures because it is rooted in action, not announcement. And it is a strength that begins with a single choice: to keep some struggles private, to face them with courage, and to let your character, rather than your complaints, speak for you.